recording this just after a classic Toronto thunderstorm, which this guest only has in their memory because they're based in Montreal, which is an exciting change of pace for this podcast. I like the fact that a lot of it is Toronto, so a lot of the people who are listening are Torontonians and they get to mix their own memories of maybe the venues or the streets or whatever that we mention with the memories of the guests. But in this case, everything is fresh. We get into talking about running a label, making your own music, changing the kind of music you play, what you grew up with, and how it affects you, even those instruments that you grew up playing. So, this is me talking to Huali. I'm Alex Southey, and this is Your Worst Song.
Love her.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. It's kind of our first time really speaking other than online, which is weird because I feel like I'm so around the community and you're so around the community, I feel like. So, but
Well,
that
I
happened.
I
Yeah.
live in Montreal, so that's
I didn't
that's the
realize you lived in
secret.
Montreal. Oh.
Everyone thinks that I'm in Toronto,
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
don't
not.
know. Okay, well, tell me about Montreal. I love Montreal. My sister went to university there, so I spent some time.
Yeah, I mean it's the best. I'm a classic Montrealer that hates Toronto and I live here as an Anglophone despite all odds
hmm
and
Do you
I
speak,
just
is
do
it
my
very
thing.
broken French or for you?
For me, I mean, I've lived here for almost 20 years now, which is wild.
Wow,
And
yeah.
I'm one of those classic Anglophone Montrealers. Like you cannot you cannot get a word out of me, but I can have a full-on conversation where I speak English and the other person speaks French and we get each other,
I love
but
that.
there's no like negotiating on each other's languages.
Well, but you probably moved to Montreal for, well, where were you initially?
I grew up in Victoria.
Oh, really? You grew up in
Yeah.
Victoria. Wow.
Yeah.
My dad and grandma are from there. I love spending time in Victoria. It's the best.
It's beautiful.
Can I ask why you left, or why Montreal is, I guess, a better question.
I wanted to move to Montreal for jazz school. And just vibes. Like,
And the vibes.
I thought about going to Humber as well, and that was I really had to mull that over, but ultimately I only applied to schools in Montreal because I was dead set on
Wow,
living
that
the
is
lifestyle.
yeah, that is a very, you were like, okay, maybe different schools in that or in around that city, but not anywhere else. That's so, had you traveled to Montreal beforehand?
Not even.
I love that. That's just, you had so much faith to jump in.
I
Wow.
mean, I was obsessed with the like Mile End kind of
Yeah.
indie rock scene.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I got the Unicorns record when I was maybe 14,
hmm
and it just blew my mind. Like, I was like, I've never heard music like this. These guys are wild. There's something happening here. And then, I started researching more and more about the scene. Obviously,
hmm
everyone knows Arcade Fire is also a Mile End band. But yeah, there's
Mac
just
DeMarco was active in Mile End for a while, though
yeah, Mac was
later, kind of.
yeah, later era. Like by the
Yeah.
time I moved to Montreal, he was around and
Yeah.
yeah, it was just it seemed like an exciting place to be for a certain kind of like musical weirdness and yeah.
It seems a lot more open to it. Or not that Toronto isn't, but I just feel like even just speaking in stereotypes about the cities, Toronto, hey, you need business in Canada. Toronto's probably like a good spot to be, or financial stuff or whatever. But musically and artistically, not only does it seem like the government cares more about the arts in Montreal, but also, maybe I'm wrong, but also the people who aren't even artists, just audiences seem to really care and are willing to take a chance on a band there, maybe rather than in Toronto. It almost feels like you have to convince the person and then they'll come.
I think yeah. I think you're
I'm
right.
speaking in very broad
For
generalizations.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about places like Mexico City or like, a lot of European cities where it's like people love culture.
Oh, of
And
course. I'm truly
Montreal,
only comparing Toronto,
not on
Montreal
that
since
level.
yeah, yeah. No, of course not. Of
But
course
it is
not.
better than Toronto.
Yes. No, you're completely right. Like, because I visited, just for example, Dublin,
Mm,
Ireland, and Dublin, like specifically, is a place that they really cherish their music culture and folk culture, let's say.
yeah.
Um, I love that. It's inspiring to be around, but that makes sense that you went to Montreal for that. Wow, that's so what was jazz school like?
I did jazz school at Concordia University and it was great. I mean, I look back on that time now so fondly. I wish I wish I had the wisdom to
Oh my God.
enjoy that time more, you know?
Absolutely. I
Uh
wish I knew then what I know now kind of
yeah, of
thing.
course. Of course. But yeah, I'm like a lifelong musician. I grew up in the classical piano world
Hmm.
and ended up going to jazz school for voice and really thought that I was like hot shit.
You have a great
Like,
speaking voice, so
oh,
if
thank
that's
you.
anything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was a strong musician, but I
Yeah,
didn't
right.
realize like how much more I had to learn, you know? I moved to Montreal as a 17-year-old that thought that I was like
That's a
the
classic late
yeah,
teens, early 20s attitude anyway. I feel like everybody has to go through that.
totally, totally. So, yeah, I mean, it was a real wake-up call. But it was just fun to be in an environment where um I was a little bit in over my head. Like jazz is so different from the classical world, and
Right.
my background gave me a lot of advantages and also some disadvantages when it
Coming
was
from the classical world, you mean?
yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was just so fun and I learned so much. And I think the thing that I miss now is just like the hours of practice and like the practice room community where like everyone's like in their own room at night like just shedding away and
Yep. But there's
come
an
out for a little
energy.
smoke.
There's a
Yeah.
kinetic energy.
And that's how we hang, like it
Hmm.
would just be like, okay, like I'm gonna take a breather and it's XYZ saxophonist is in the hallway and oh, let's try a tune together and
Yeah,
okay, let me
right.
go back and work on my scales again. Like that's
That's so
it,
cool.
it's like musical dream camp.
Exactly. I was just gonna say, not only is that like dream camp, but it's like what some people would be more than happy with having their life be is just that,
100%.
right?
Yeah. That's something that like the luxury of time when you're young,
Yeah,
like I'm like, damn, I wish I could just practice all the time.
I
Like
know. And yet
I'd
you're
be
so
such a
right.
killer.
Youth is wasted on the young, right? I don't know who
Yes.
said that, but um well, I'm curious actually more. You said that you grew up in the world of classical. So by that is by all you mean by that is you began with classical piano lessons or anything kind of lessons, and then by I'm basically wondering, by world, do you mean you were like deep in it, playing a bunch of recitals and all that stuff, or do you just mean you were like any other kid who was told to play some classical instrument?
No, I was deep. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Do
I
you want to
I
talk
was
about it?
head first in the I mean, sure,
I'm
it's
curious.
well, I mean, I would say like I was typical in the sense that I did the conservatory program. I would do my exams every year.
Mhm. Those are
But
the
yeah,
grades, right?
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I went th I that was sort of the educational framework that
Mhm.
was containing this all.
Mhm.
But I also did like a number of recitals every year.
Okay,
I would participate in music like kind of competitive music festivals
right.
where you go and
And you each
try
play a piece, kind of?
yeah, play
Okay.
better than everyone else in your age group is
So
the
no
aim.
wonder
And
if you were so it sounds like you were probably decently successful at this. No wonder you thought you were hot shit at 17 or 18 coming into a music school. Like that, I don't blame you, even if you're right that you shouldn't be that confident at that age.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think music education had always been pretty easy for me,
Do you think
to
it's a
that
bit of,
point.
sorry to cut you off. I just want to
No.
say, do you think that's because, like, personally, I think some people are definitely born with a bit of natural talent and then they need to hone it with a
Uh-huh.
bunch of practice. Other people have maybe not no natural talent and then they really need to practice but can still get there. Do you think you're more of the former? Is that what you mean by what you're saying?
Uh, I don't know. I always struggle with the talent piece because
Mm-hmm.
I know I have a natural I have a natural joy when it comes
Mm.
to engaging with music, and I've always loved it. Even before I was in piano, I think. I mean, I started classes when I was 4. So, but
True,
I
right.
think I always kind of was drawn to music, loved it. Like even as a young child, I never
Mm-hmm.
cried about practicing. Like it was really something that I loved.
Okay, that's rare.
Um, yeah, and I think that was more so what got me ahead
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
any kind of natural, like I didn't have perfect pitch. I didn't have any of these kind of like
Okay, I see.
wonderkind kind of abilities, but
Yeah.
I just loved practicing. I loved engaging with music. Um, and beyond kind of the concert pianist world, which was a huge part of my life growing
Mm-hmm.
up, I was also a choral singer. And I was just like, I was down to do whatever music anywhere. Like, I was like, oh, you want to hire me to sing in a church choir? Like,
Yeah, right.
great. I've never been in a church before. Like, let's do this.
That's
So,
so cool. Wow. What an and also never been in a church before, so very secular upbringing is the
yes,
okay,
indeed.
well,
Yeah,
huh.
I stepped foot in a church for the first time. Well, I guess my high school had like a chapel in it.
Okay, I see,
But it
right.
was like a non-denominational chapel. And but my first like the first like real services I ever attended were like as one of the choral singers in an Anglican evensong.
Wow.
And I
That's
had
so
no
interesting.
idea what evensong even was
Yeah, yeah,
before
exactly.
that.
Not to mention, like, if you're not familiar at all with and I'd probably say this about any religion, like there's a lot of pageantry and like
Mm,
almost what you might think looks like theater from the outside. And that
mm,
would be so interesting for someone without having it in their home in any way, just to walk in for the first time and be confronted with that. I mean, obviously, you know some of it because you have to practice the songs, you know that what that's going to sound like, but
yeah. Well,
yeah.
this was an adult choir, and I was brought in by a choral director that I knew
Oh,
as like a someone that could sight read really well.
wow. Okay.
And I remember the first time being there, it was wild because it's like there were no rehearsals necessarily like regularly. You would rehearse for an hour and a half before even song began, just kind of run through the repertoire.
Okay.
And there were
Okay.
so many kind of senior members of the choir that the repertoire was like relatively familiar and stuff, but I was reading like it's old music, so sometimes you're reading like a form of notation that is archaic, like I was like,
Totally.
oh, how do I follow this? And then we finished the rehearsal, everyone starts putting robes on, and I was like, oh, am I supposed to do I
Yeah, right. Where's my
like
robe?
and yeah, and then they're like, oh, this person's probably about your height, and I'm like, how do I did I do this right? And
Whoa, that's so funny.
yeah, we would come down from the choir loft and there was a processional. And I remember the first processional too. I was like, no, but no one wanted to brief me on this today. Like, I'm just like, how do I do this? Where do I sit? Where do I walk?
Well, not to mention, which you were sort of getting at as well, it's such old, a lot of it is such old music that if
Mhm.
they're and you're a choral singer, so are you singing like Latin or old Italian or
It's
what?
the Anglican Evensong is British.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
so it's kind of like early Baroque British church music.
Okay, I see.
And the majority of it is in English
Right,
um
okay.
for the Anglican church, but certainly I mean evensong is basically like Catholic evening mass. And
Okay.
so there was some Latin. There
Hmm.
were Anglican prayers. I don't know if they're necessarily just Anglican. I don't know,
Right, right,
but
right.
there were prayers that everyone would just say. I'd be like, ah, I mean, it's blah, 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 Jesus and the Son sitting and left hand,
Yeah,
like
exactly. And the little cross thing that you do. All right, there you go. Wow. Well, so how do you, so you were doing that as a younger person brought in by adults. And then you eventually go to university, switch over to jazz. I'm sure that was like I mean, like musically a culture shock, sort of, when
Mm,
you're used to
mhm.
the boundaries of classical music, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was like you said it provided a bit of positives and negatives coming from that background. I'm curious what some of the positives were.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I sight read
Oh, that okay, stuff like that. Yeah.
better now. Like, just, I'm still great at sight reading. It's like
Hmm.
it's my best skill.
Wow.
Like I
That's a
can just like
very good skill.
go in and pound out, and that's not something jazz players necessarily do that much.
Huh.
So that, learning stuff in that way was a lot easier. I went in for voice actually because I already knew I wanted to study jazz as a supplement. Like I didn't want to continue in studying classical music at the
Gotcha.
university level. And I started taking jazz piano lessons, and I felt very blocked by the constraints of Western classical music education and canon. Like
Hmm.
it's like I had a mental block in terms of improvising and getting thinking through the way that I wanted my fingers to move. Um, and at that time, I was also doing musical theater a lot. I was also a theater kid.
Hmm.
I'm hitting like the nexus of uncool stuff, but uh, so
It's all right. You're
yeah,
cool now. You got a dope hat. You got the Brooklyn,
you
is it
know,
Brooklyn Nets?
it is,
Yeah,
yes.
how nice.
Limited edition leopard print.
Oh, wow. I love that you had to get that on mic, fully recorded.
Well, the people can't see it,
That's
so
true. You're right. You're right. You're right. Thank you. But yeah.
um, yeah, I basically like yeah through that path was like, oh well, I'm already singing a lot of American songbook stuff. Like maybe I
Mhm.
should consider taking some jazz voice lessons, and that might be a better instrument for me to audition on. So that's sort of that's kind of what I mean, where I had a lot of advantages when it came to the depth of my music education and
Right.
certain skills, musicality that I already had.
Right.
But yeah, I would say like in terms of like freedom of expression and the jazz idiom, like I had some real blocks on the piano for a long time. Um, so I entered the program with voice as my primary instrument and then did piano secondary. And I
Mm.
really kind of did have to come at it through like, let me learn this idiom through a new instrument and then I can apply it
What you
to
learn, yeah, wow, that's almost like I learned you have to learn a bit of a language when you go to you have to prove you're a certain level of proficiency when you go to university and get the bachelor's degree at UBC where I went,
Mhm.
and I was so bad at French. No, most people would just take French and then that would shorten the amount they had to take classes. I was so bad at French I decided to take Spanish. But the point is, as I learned about Spanish, it made me think about English. And it sounds like that's what
Ah.
happened with you with classical. It was sort of like, okay, going into jazz actually made you look back at, sorry, going back to jazz made you look back at the classical and sort of help with the block that
Hmm.
you were getting to through on the piano.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So what happens when you come out of university? What do you, because you're sort of on the business side of things and a musician. So do
I
you
sure
lead?
am.
Yeah. So does which foot led first? Was it the music?
Oh, definitely the music.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I love my job, and hopefully Evan Newman, the managing director of Outside Next Door, doesn't hear this, but like I would quit my job in a minute if if something happened where I could happily
For
just
sure.
like write songs and perform for the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I finished university with the very outdated belief that I would be able to just get gigs and maybe
Oh,
do like session work and
and just work your way up.
yeah, kind of. And I was,
Heartbreaking.
it was like the same heartbreak as getting to jazz school where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not the shit. And then I like left jazz school being like, okay, but I am the shit now. And then be like, oh, no one cares.
Yes, exactly. Oh,
This
the
job I'm
industry,
looking for doesn't exist.
yeah, or it anymore.
Yeah.
It was true 20 years ago. I talked about that with Nat from Love Yet, who's coming on, but oh man, yeah, just that sort of. bittersweet, that realization when it dawns on you that it's like the thing that I've been dreaming about and aiming towards is a mirage that existed years ago, and there's a new
Mhm.
horizon that you need to contend with. Uh,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
very
totally.
right, especially with streaming. That's really the main page turn, I
But
feel
also
like.
the way that people make music. And
That's true.
I really banked on being a session musician. Like I was like, I am the perfect person to do this. Like
Right.
I can repeat a performance over and over again. Like, but I'm also have the improvising skills, but I'm not just a vocalist, I'm also a pianist. And
You
if I
would think
need,
it's perfect.
yeah,
It's
like
like,
I was like, I
yeah.
have trained my whole life for this job. And yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky that I was at Concordia because they have an electroacoustics department that is housed like it's all kind of together. Like we mix, there's
Uh-huh.
certain classes we share. So I was like aware of this like electronic music thing
Hmm.
happening. Um and it was in my last year of jazz school where I was like starting to meet more and more of the electroacoustic students, and one of them cracked Ableton and put it on my laptop, and I was like, whoa, I've like never thought about the possibility of making music without like recording a band.
Organic humans or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it just I didn't know anything about how that happened. So it was like I got a sense of like, oh, people don't need session musicians as much.
Right.
But it really hit like when I finished and I was like, session musician for hire.
Oh, so did you ever have
I'm
any
available.
spinning the sign on the street corner? Did you have any cool gigs that came out of it though? Like it can't, anything that stands out?
I mean, in my life, sure.
I guess in
But
I mean in that period of time right after.
no,
No, okay.
not one. And I ended up doing a lot of I was in a couple different top 40 groups, like that would sing like cover band
I
things.
gotcha. I gotcha.
Like I had a gig at like a couple different steakhouses,
I see. I see. Yeah.
like that sort of vibe.
The 2 or
And
3 hour background cover music sort of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
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 And I was doing that, again, in retrospect, like pretty cool that I was working in that as much as I did when I finished school, but
Mm,
like felt very demoralizing at the time. And
yes.
it like frankly is a demoralizing gig. Like, you're singing like Jessie J's like I don't even remember what that song is now. I don't whatever.
I'm not
Doesn't
sure, but I
matter.
totally agree with you.
You're
It's just,
singing the green light, give me the green light to like a
yes.
bunch of 60-year-old rich people eating steak that like would prefer you weren't there.
Exactly. Yeah, they would pay more to have you without their steak, the
Yeah,
steak without you.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's so true. Although the one good thing I would say is it can pay well. So at least that's something.
It did not, but
No? It can. It can though.
yes. And
Um,
had I done things like if I wanted to go the cruise ship route, which
oh that, yeah.
that had been offered to me, or like even like there's groups like that do kind of hotel tours, like they'll be like the
Mm-hmm.
resident performer at this resort for a week and then move to
Right.
another one. Those do pay better. I just I
It's
didn't
what
want
you
to
want from your life,
I didn't want to
as a
be
musician.
beholden to like I'm stuck here now. But what I will say that it gave me was incredible performance tenacity, which has saved
Right.
me in my life for moving on.
Well, this is a perfect segue because the first question I usually ask is, what is your worst gig memory?
I have a ridiculous worst gig.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It I dare say it may be the worst of anyone's worst gig.
I cannot wait to hear this.
I will state it on record, and I hope to hear of other artists that have a worse gig than this one.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I was on a 2018 North American tour, my first North American tour, supporting Cadence Weapon and Fat Tony.
Cool.
And we had some really great shows, but we also had some terrible shows. And I was the first, we were a touring package of three artists, which in retrospect is a terrible idea. And I was the first opener of three. So it was always like every show I was like, okay, I'm gonna start playing to an empty room. Like there's just not enough time. Like we
Yeah,
can't even push it back that much because we're
yeah.
three. So I was kind of used to that vibe. But anyway, all of that to say,
It
we
toughens
get
you up, like you were saying, for sure. The
oh yeah.
tenacity, like you were saying. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, we get to Winnipeg. We're playing the Goodwill, which is a lovely venue,
Mhm.
really nice people. Seems like it's probably going to be cool. Like, I feel like also Cadence Weapon being the uh, national representative of Edmonton, like there's a good Winnipeg, Edmonton, it's kind of a
Yeah,
similar
right.
vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, this is probably going to be a good show. And for whatever reason, it was terrible. And especially at the beginning, like people really came late to that show. So Cadence Weapon did play to some people, but I played to literally no one,
Oh,
except there were two people that were already drinking at the Goodwill.
right.
So they didn't pay cover even, they were just there.
Uh-huh. It's always the bar bums that are like, yeah.
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 So, you know, then they get kind of into it because I also was like sort of a bully back then, like because
Okay.
of the challenging
Right.
position I had on the tour where I was really like, like everyone stand up,
For
like
sure.
give
You were
me
a bit
some energy.
confrontational, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. So I convinced these two guys to stand and like be engaged, but they were wasted.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, I remember at some point like they were getting kind of chirpy and I was kind of chirping back
Hmm.
and it was fine. I didn't care. We were just whatever. It was already so absurd.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, yeah,
vibe,
yeah. Why
like I'm like
not add
fighting
that?
with these two drunk guys while I'm trying to play a set.
Yeah.
Um and then yeah, I don't remember like I think we got in, like a fight about sex work or something.
You and the audience members.
Yeah.
And this is as you're playing.
Well, it was like in my banter or
Okay, I
something.
see. I got you.
It's something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then um anyway, so it's already like a crazy confrontational vibe, but I'm entertained,
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
I'm holding my own. And then one of the guys tips me while I'm playing.
Oh
And I was
no.
like, great, thank you for the tip. Like, I love being the stripper of
Yeah,
Goodwill,
right.
like whatever.
Right.
Again, I don't care. I'm like, great, I'm gonna keep this money. And then I think the tipping seemingly crossed a line with the bar staff. So then they kicked them out. They were like, this is not
Whoa.
safe for the performer. Like, you're
Oh,
harassing her.
right, right. Okay.
But then I'm like, well, do I continue?
Yeah,
Because now
yeah.
there's no one here. Like, do I finish my set? Like, I don't,
Oh God,
do I
yeah.
take my $20 tip and just leave?
Hey, that's still pretty good. That's at
Yeah.
least you got something.
Yeah.
Wow, that's tough. And so people still slowly petered in kind of over the different sets.
Yeah, and I don't even remember if I don't remember if I finished my set or if like what happened.
Early ones
But
like that are just rough.
yeah.
You really do
Um
have to black it out. I almost don't I like don't blame you for not remembering. You really just have to like whatever.
yeah, it was, the whole vibe though was so memorable. And then also the idea that like the only two audience members were then ejected. Like
I
I
know.
was
Yeah,
like, what am
exactly.
I
They were there
what's the
they were
point?
there before you got there,
Yeah.
didn't pay but did tip you and then were
And
kicked
then
out
yeah.
finally after you got them into it. That's just like the worst
Yeah.
results of every situation. Oh God. Well, also, was it your first time in the city? I'm curious. Like, was that
I
an
think
interesting part of the North American tour is seeing a bunch of cities that you hadn't seen?
I can't remember if I'd been to
Okay.
Winnipeg before that or not.
But did you enjoy it at the
I
time?
I truly don't remember. But yeah, I had a great time in Winnipeg. After the show, I mean, again, I'm pretty sure, as far as I recall, Cadence Weapon did a great show by the
Hmm.
end. Like I think a lot of people came kind of specifically to see him.
Okay, right.
Um, and then
Well, like you said,
we
he's
went
sort of
out
more known
after.
there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And then we went out after to like someone's studio and we had like a lovely time partying at the studio and like
Sweet.
I have a great impression of like Winnipeggers, the vibe,
Good.
but yeah, like it just happened to be the worst show ever.
God. Yeah, that's a tough one. That'll stick with you until forever. Uh, well, what about best gig? Because that's usually what I ask next. Is there a best gig that stands out?
Yeah. I played
You're not
when I
going to claim you have
released.
the best gig ever, right? Because that would be
No,
your.
definitely not. But
Okay.
best gig for me
Yes, of course.
ever
Yes.
was I can't hold both
I know you
titles,
can't hold
you
both, so
know?
you're just gonna have the
Yeah,
worst
yeah,
title. Okay. That's the better one to have on this podcast anyway.
I think so too.
Yeah, good.
Um, yeah, it was the album release party for my debut record as Huali. And that would have been in 2019 in September. Uh, and I in some ways there was nothing like crazy special about it. It was like my hometown album release show.
Hmm.
I played Casa del Popolo.
Cool.
But it was like super oversold and just like very buzzy, exciting
Yeah, that's exciting.
debut record, like I just felt so happy to be like, here's this very legitimate thing now that
Hmm.
after all of these years of being independent and like it's
Yep.
printed on vinyl, it's like it's real. I'm real.
Yep.
Um, and not the power, but somebody I think accidentally switched the lights off because it was really packed to the brim. Like I'm sure
Okay.
someone just leaned on a light switch or something,
Yes,
and then
yes.
but then everybody brought their phones out
Oh, that's
like
dope.
no prompting, like everyone just brought out their phones and like it was like a really sad song too, and it was just
Uh,
like perfect moment. And I was like, wow, here I am on this stage that like, when I first moved to Montreal, like I would go see like whatever indie rock band,
hmm.
like just like that whole scene that I was obsessed with. Like I was going to Kaza shows and just being like, wow, everyone plays this room. Like I love the idea that I'm here. Like it felt transcendental
Yes.
to like be an audience member at that time. And then to be like, wow, I just had this like incredibly heartwarming and supportive moment where I felt like my community came out for me and like,
Uh,
wow, I actually have fans, and like here I am at Kaza. It's not a huge room, but it feels like a historic room to
yeah,
me.
absolutely, absolutely. That's so nice. It just sounds like it was the culmination of everything and yeah, it was the culmination of everything mixed with it sounds like almost like a graduation inside yourself into feeling like, okay, this is the beginning of me being established. This is vinyl. I'm here. I'm playing the show that I respect other people who have played this show. So therefore, we're on a
Yeah,
closer level. You know what I mean?
totally.
And that's such an exciting moment. Or even sometimes it feels like a longer than a moment. It almost feels like can be like a season or something. It feels like a,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. I mean, I at that time too, I really was taking a lot of time to reflect on um yeah, kind of like what I had accomplished in Montreal to that point. And
Hmm.
thinking back on like, wow, when I was 17 and I moved here, like playing Kazaa seemed impossible. And like,
Right.
like, oh, all I wanted to do was like meet these people, like musicians that are now my friends that like I
Yes.
was just like a fan of as a kid, and like
Right.
that I think it was the first time I really took stock of like, wow, I like really accomplished a lot of my dreams.
Well, that, which is so wonderful, uh, but I'm wondering if you also, because I felt this way a little bit, uh, just even when I have played some shows or, even played on the radio or something, it's like it was wonderful, but it also taught me that the industry, at least in Canada, wasn't as big as I thought it was.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was a shock. I was like, this is all very real. And these people aren't giants or these songs aren't giants. They're just the exact same size as me, sort of. It was a very bizarre
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? I know it's a
I
bit of a,
do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
do. I totally know what you're saying. And I think what's interesting is like, listen, I don't want to overstate this or to my own horn, but I
Hmm.
think there are probably some people out there that look at my life and they're like, wow, You're like a
Yeah.
successful musician.
Yeah. That's what
And
I think. You're looking at one of them right now.
right, okay,
I think
cool.
that about
Thank you.
you. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I don't think that about myself,
Sure.
but it's not what I thought it was. Like I was like, oh,
Uh-huh.
these people must like just like get to don't like do music as their day job, and like they're probably getting their like films and movies all the time, and they have so many
Exactly.
fans, and like everywhere they go they're playing full shows and
Yeah.
whatever, like I had a very skewed idea of what that looked like before, which made me idolize people on this much higher
Oh,
level, and always,
preach it.
yeah, and always made me
Absolutely.
feel like I wasn't there.
Yes.
And as I've gotten closer to people, that are a little older than me, that have been doing this for longer, I see that our lives are not so different. And then I can be like, oh, cool. Like that sucks that like you're not rich. Like I wish we were all
Right.
rich, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, exactly. It's like the romanticization ends at a
mhm,
certain point. But
mhm.
there's also something to feel like you're a little bit living in the legitimate reality of being a musician. You are doing it, but I totally agree that it's you didn't know that this is what it was going to look like, or that the people you idolized were going through this thing and not what you thought. It wasn't this outsized career,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And um, but I think this is happening more and more in every uh, creative avenue, let's say.
Yeah.
But the the dwindling middle class of the creative fields, is really
Yes.
real. And um I think that's the thing, is like I can safely say like I'm a comfortably middle, well, I don't know, comfortably is a stretch, but
Right.
I
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
I am a middle class musician,
Which
which
is
is,
rare in itself.
yeah, which is great,
Yes. Yeah.
and would I love to like not have any other work?
Of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Am I grateful that all of my work is in music? Absolutely,
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, I think it's just this, you never think about like what does it look like to be kind of like like normal musician. It's always
Right.
like I would like to be, I don't know, like who's a normal, who's like not crazy example. Like I don't think I never thought I was going to be Beyonce, but I think
Right.
like
Right.
if I was as successful as like Saint Vincent, that would be
Uh-huh.
pretty sick.
Yes,
Like that's like,
definitely.
you never think about like what does it look like if you have a sustainable career but you're never Saint Vincent.
You're right. I agree completely. It's like yeah, living it's sort of living in the shadow of your initial large dream and
Mm.
oh, it's bizarre. Uh but it sounds like you're like taking stock of that is really healthy. It sounds like you're in a like you think about it well. Like you don't lose sight of the fact that you are relative to so many people who attempt music successful.
Yeah. I work really hard.
Yeah, yeah.
I do a lot of self-reflection, and no, but having the label job too, I think
Sure.
is so illuminating for that, because it's hard to be detached from your own dreams and ambitions,
Right.
and uh you know manage expectations in that way, manage pace. Like I
Uh-huh.
used to be in such a hurry all the time to like accomplish stuff.
Yeah.
But especially from the outside looking at somebody's career, especially like a developing artist, I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, like you have all the time in the world. Like this is great. You're like, you have no idea how much better you are than
Right.
like like you should listen to all of the submissions we get. They're crap. Like
Yeah, exactly. Well, I wasn't sure when to get into it, but do you want to talk a bit about working at the label and like just talk about that angle of things?
sure, yeah.
How did
Um,
that come to be in the first place?
yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest way to tell this is
Okay.
that um after being a top 40 cover band singer for a while,
Uh-huh.
I started to get really serious about trying to make Huali a project. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do like, I'm gonna teach music, I'm gonna write music, and I'm gonna DJ at night, and that's
Hmm.
it. And that's how I'm gonna scrape by doing these things. I'm gonna be totally committed. Um, and was just kind of in the DIY scene in Montreal for a while. And eventually, an artist known as Flist
Hmm.
contacted me and asked me if I would be down to start a label with them. So we had a little
Had you known this? Had you known Flist?
we'd done some lineups together. We
Okay,
yeah,
but
we
like
knew
not
each
a
other.
ton. You in passing or hung out?
Hung out, but
Okay,
not
okay.
like at that point I wouldn't say we were like
You weren't
deep
besties.
friends. No,
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
became besties
Okay.
obviously as you
Y-
run a record label,
You'd
that
hope so.
happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we created a label called Art Not Love Records, that I think survived a couple years.
Hmm.
And then we were like, wow, this is really hard. But I gained a lot of knowledge for that. And it was effectively like just a space for us to release our own music and like
Hmm.
help out a couple other friends.
Hmm.
Um, and then from there, I ended up doing, for some reason, a master's in musicology, which was a
For
very,
some reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it was very professionalizing. And
Hmm.
while I will never go back into the academy, it reminded me that I do have like these kinds of skills to be
Hmm.
like very organized and like write a lot and hold knowledge in my brain.
Right.
Um, and after that, I started working at Pop Montreal Festival. And it was just sort of this
Okay.
thing of like having had the experience of the label and then
Hmm.
going through this like hyper professionalizing activity of grad school. Um, I started working at Pop and was still, working on my project the whole time. I got signed to Next Door Records moments after I handed in my thesis. Like it just sort of
Oh, wow.
happened at the same time.
Wow.
I was simultaneously working on my thesis and finishing my debut record.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah,
To be signed on your debut record though is also an accomplishment.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's
It
very
was
exciting.
it was very validating.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That word
Yes.
specifically. I feel like not enough people share that specifically. It's fucking validating when
Hmm.
you hear outside opinion is positive about what you're doing, especially to this extent.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Sorry, but
yeah,
continue.
anyway, all of that to say, like I was kind of, you know, starting trying to release this first record, figuring out how to do that, alongside the help of the label, like no longer running my own label ship,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, and working at Pop, and eventually kind of the label just sort of offered me a job. Like the person that had the A&R position before for Next Door was leaving,
Hmm.
and I was like, should I do you think I would be good at this? And they were like, yeah. And then I was like, should I apply? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I don't know. Is it weird if I'm on the label? And they were like, oh. And then, I went through the regular interview process kind of.
Uh-huh.
But they knew me obviously.
Yeah, right, right,
So,
right. But it
yeah.
sounds
So
like
then,
you legitimately have it wasn't like label nepotism, let's say. It sounds like you legitimately had the skills that they would have needed to run
yeah, I mean, I
that
was
position.
working like in the industry already.
Exactly, exactly.
So, yeah, that's sort of how it just sort of all happened that way. And now, where once I was very happy to have separation of church and state, um, I have now
Melted
recombined.
them together.
Yes.
Yeah, very nice. And is it like I guess you've been doing it for a little while now, but like both.
Mhm.
Uh have you reached a balance with it?
No.
No. Okay. I love the honesty. I love the
Yeah, I
honesty.
mean, it's funny. I really thought I had for a
Uh-huh.
while, but I consciously put off releasing anything
Okay,
for the
right.
first like year and a half that I was working there.
Which feels like
Um,
a long time if you're in the rhythm of writing and
yeah, but it was
that kind of
COVID.
thing.
It was, I got the job at the end of 2021.
True. Okay,
So
okay.
I had released an EP at the end of 2020, which was insane in
Mm-hmm.
retrospect, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy the label helped me do that.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I sort of consciously was like, okay, I was gonna really rush to get the next record done, but let me just kind of vibe this out and
Mm-hmm.
like, I it didn't seem like I really wanted to be touring yet, what with the chaos of that time. So I was like, whatever, like it also felt like my project was already kind of dead by then, like I hit that like post-COVID lull and I was
Oh,
like,
yes,
it
yes.
sort of doesn't matter if I release something like really fast or not. Like
Right.
I'm still going to be kind of like reinvigorating this with life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I felt very balanced for a while. Like I was like, look at me, I'm finishing my record. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
inspired by everyone on the roster. Like I listen to their new stuff, makes me want to write.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to the point of like, I am ready to release this record, let's
Mm-hmm.
go. I was like, damn, I have no time to be an
Uh,
artist. Like, and it was also a very busy time at the label. Like we had a lot of releases going on.
right.
And that's where I was like, oh, I have no balance. Like I really thought I had this figured out, but this is
Well,
crazy.
at least you can see it for what it is now, you know?
Yeah. And I think, there's just certain things like it's advantageous to be my own label rep
Sure,
in
sure.
some ways, but it's upon reflection, like I should just ask someone else at the label to project manage it. Like I don't know why
I'm
I was.
surprised you don't.
Well, I don't know. I never thought about it. I was like, I'm a next door artist. I project manage all the next door
Right,
artists.
right. No, I see why, but yeah, that's so I wonder what different things could come out of having somebody else do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never do it again this way.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I love being wrong and I'm
That's a good
happy to
quality too.
yeah, whatever. I'm happy
Yeah.
to just admit that like, hey, I just this is a cool experience because I've learned to not do this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of your music and getting back into that, what do you think? I know this is tough because it's like talking about, your children figuratively, but what do you think is your best song that you've released?
I really reflected on this because
Okay.
of course I know what the questions will be.
Yeah.
Uh
The last one looms large.
oh, that one was I knew right away. This
Okay.
one, because it's hard to be it's easier to be humble and self-deprecating than it
Yes, it
is to
is.
be celebratory and
Earnestly
positive.
celebratory. Yes, yeah, absolutely. But I'm asking you to.
Yeah, I mean, I think uh Part-Time Muses from my latest record is my best song.
Okay.
And um I think that because it's one of those songs that just wrote itself,
Mm-hmm.
one of
Mm-hmm.
those magical moments where it's
Totally.
like I'm feeling a certain type of way and it just created the perfect nexus for
Yes.
music flowing out of me so effortlessly and
Uh
beautifully, So
absolutely. That's how it feels. You're describing it perfectly.
yeah. So that's like it's one that I didn't like I grapple with a lot of music and especially this
Uh-huh.
last record, like I felt like I really was like jamming pieces together and
Uh-huh.
pulling things off and like, I felt like there's a lot of molding, but with that track it was always kind of like, no, I think I wrote a good song and working on producing it with Alex also was just everything kind of flowed about it always.
Yeah.
And it's fun to sing on stage. Like it's my favorite thing to perform right
Wait,
now.
sorry, which Alex?
Alexander Thibault.
Tebow. Okay.
Yeah, he's also a Montrealer. He
Okay, okay.
he co-produces all of my stuff with me.
Nice, nice, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. But yeah, yeah. So basically it sounds like it's your favorite or best because of the way it came to you, which is so interesting. You're basing it off of sort of your relationship with it when you wrote it, as opposed to like some other people have come in here like analytically, this one is my best song, air
Oh,
quotes.
I don't know about that. And
Okay,
that's
yeah.
it's very funny because I am a label A&R and
Yeah,
like
right, 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 right.
I like cannot. I'm like vibes only kind of A&R. Like I'm like I think my vibe says you're a star.
Yeah, right,
Like
right,
it's like I don't
exactly.
know. I'm not
No,
gonna
totally.
Fibonacci sequence your like fucking song.
Yeah,
No.
as much as I would love that, as much as
Yeah.
we'd all love that.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it's the way it comes off. It's the way that it feels when I perform it. It's the idea that I like listening to it still.
Hmm.
I love the music video too. Like it's just I don't yeah, I guess like I don't know if it's my best song
No, of
like
course.
in terms of whatever metrics would
Objectively,
judge that.
you're speaking
Yeah,
subjectively.
but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
my favorite song. I'll say
Yeah,
that, you know?
sure.
Um, and yeah, it feels good. I think
I
I'm
love it.
always gonna love it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good test that you like it, you've liked it all the way from conception to now, because there's definitely a lot of times where I feel like people get excited about a song, and then by the time they've actually recorded it and it's coming out, they're like, fuck that song. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Oh
Uh
yeah, I feel that way about most of my work.
exactly, exactly. Who would like this garbage? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of garbage, let's chat about what you think your worst song is. Drum roll.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I knew right away.
Yes.
And it is that feeling. It's like one of these songs that I was really excited about at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time it was fully written and recorded and produced and ready for stage, I was like, I hate this song. This doesn't, I don't want to embody this song. I don't want to, it's hard to sing live. It's
Oh yeah.
whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the song is called Meltdown and it's the closing song from my first record.
Okay.
Um,
Well, it must have seemed like a strong, I don't know how you think about album uh order, but I feel like the last song, it's sort of a last impression. So you must have thought
which was
something about
also a
it.
mistake, Alex. Like
Okay. Okay, that's true. I didn't
everything
think about
about
that.
this was
That's the taste in your mouth. This worst song. That's so funny. Uh, so it's just like with the song you with your favorite. It's sort of, are you instantly you sort of knew, or are you saying that it was like what I was saying earlier because you were initially excited and then grew to hate it?
yeah.
It's
Like
more that.
I hate it. I have consistently hated it for
Okay.
such a long time that as soon as you were like, I'm gonna ask you what your worst song is, I was like, oh, I know what that is.
Oh, that's so funny. I love when it's a no-brainer, because then it's really, you know, it's the worst, as opposed to deliberating. Sometimes you hear that with a band, but
Mm.
yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah.
Did your co-producer did you ask them by any chance?
No, I don't he probably likes it. I don't know.
Okay.
It's funny because I listened to it before coming on today and I was
Uh-huh.
like, damn, I really hate this song, but the production's sick. Like, this is Alex made some great choices. He like
Right.
took it to a place that I couldn't have because I probably hated it by the time we were doing that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, funnily enough, it also similarly kind of flowed out of me.
Mm-hmm.
I was going through it like a very deep betrayal. Um,
Yeah.
and sort of just processing that and I just wrote this incredibly sad song.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the last things that got included on that debut record. Because it was that time where I was making the selections and I was like, well, I
Uh-huh.
have to include this song that I bare my soul on and
Yeah,
it's so
right.
honest. And then like a few months later, I was like, damn, like I hate rehashing that. I don't want to live that moment again. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it in this like impossible to sing range because I wanted to capture this like fragility and like kind of like
Uh-huh.
crackling in my voice. So I was like, oh, I never want to do this live. Like, everything. I just felt like the cards were stacked against it.
Totally. And it makes, and you over time just resent it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
hilarious. Wow. Because I so know what you mean. It's but that's interesting that part of the reason you dislike it doesn't sound like, it sounds like musically there are reasons, like you're saying with the range, but it's also what it represents. It's more that. Is that correct? Because you like the
Yeah.
production, right?
The production's cool, but again, there are certain songs I'm pretty hands-on with the production.
Mm.
I know that one I gave Alex my little Ableton demo and I was like, do what you will, And it's
Yes.
cool. He made great choices and that's why I like working with him.
Right.
But
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
You need to have that chemistry with the with your producer, co-writer, or whatever you're gonna call
totally.
them. Yeah.
Beyond the range, I think I made some melodic choices that are insane. Um, you know, there's kind of like I think almost because I was singing in that range, I wanted to do something like even more challenging with the
Uh-huh.
delivery and it just yeah, it's like not as focused. And I didn't used to edit my songwriting very much. Like it was very much, especially after that first record, like
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh no, like there's these things, they're like artifacts that exist the way they are.
Uh-huh.
And then there were so many songs that I didn't love on that first record. That I was like, I'm never doing that again. Like I'm gonna really sit with stuff and like edit it and
Mm-hmm.
be critical in the way that I am when I'm in writing rooms with other people, or like I don't know why I
Yeah.
give myself that pass. So the second record, like the one that just came out this year, like it is a lot more like cerebral in a certain sense
Uh-huh.
of like
Huh.
I rewrote a lot of stuff, and like that's Part-Time Muses, my best song, was
Yeah.
one of the few that didn't go through that process as much.
Which is a fantastic title too. I just wanted to add. I love
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was so enlightening in many ways. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Uh, as you know, now I guess we play the song at the end, so I would love for you to just reintroduce yourself and then the song, and it'll play.
Uh, Great. Well, Alex, thank you for having me. I love talking, and I'm an avid podcast girly,
Oh,
so this has been a
fantastic.
real pleasure.
Good.
Um, I am Huali, and this is my worst song, Meltdown.
Woo! You crushed that. See that radio voice, like I was saying. You have a great
I try not to put too much stock in it. I'm fine with it. Rather know now that I'm asking too much. Rather not falter. Rather just smudge it out. Easier to cry than to forgive. And I have lost my grip. Still you expect me to keep my shit together. Smile for your mother, bear it like that weather. All I can tell you is the roof's caved in, and I don't think I'll last this one out. All I can tell you is my mind still spins when I think of the two of you allowed. All the kisses I have stitched together, praying that things will get better, but that shit rarely goes my way. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I was about to kick it with you forever. I wasn't over my yet, girl, coming at you with no follow through. Surely I got the upper ring of your behind me, damn. Now my plans be drenched in water, then so I will follow right behind your bravado. Don't show me